In this episode, we're going to focus on profile dependencies. So InSpec profiles can depend on other profiles and bring in their controls, allowing us to reuse them. We specify this in the profile's metadata, and the results of which appear in the profile's lock file. So let's first create a baseline profile for our other profiles to use. I have within my directory a control file called base_system.rb. I'm going to use the InSpec init profile to generate a profile, and then I'm going to move that into the profile's control directory. I then will spend some time modifying that profile, updating the README and its YAML metadata file to accurately describe what it performs. I'll also remove the example controls and then finally push this up to a GitHub repository. Now, with that complete, it's time for us to use that profile. So here, I'm going to use InSpec exec baseline and then the other Tomcat profile within my directory. So instead of running both of these profiles from the command line using InSpec exec, what I'd like to do is have the Tomcat profile use the baseline profile as a dependency. So let's specify a dependency via a path to another profile. I'm going to open up the Tomcat compliance metadata file, and here I'm going to specify that this profile depends on another profile, in this case the baseline profile that we specified, and then a relative path to that profile. Now, when I execute a scan of just the Tomcat profile, I am going to be surprised to see that the Tomcat profile does not yet immediately include the controls defined within that dependent profile. So first, I need to take a look at the inspec.lock file. The inspec.lock file is automatically generated whenever I execute a profile. By default, when I initially ran the Tomcat profile, it gave me an InSpec lock file that says I have no dependencies. So what I'm going to do now is remove that lock file. Removing this lock file will give us a chance to rebuild the dependencies for this profile based on the new updated metadata that I have specified for the Tomcat profile. So here we see that when I run the Tomcat scan, I will now see the baseline profile displayed as well. However, no controls are being displayed here. So there's an additional thing that we need to do. So I'm going to open up the examples.rb file, or one of the control files. I'm going to add a line called include_controls and then the name of the profile that I am importing controls from. Here I'm going to execute the scan again, and this time I should see the full results of running both of those profiles, the Tomcat one and of course its dependency or controls within the dependent profile. Now you'll see in the InSpec lock file it has been updated and we see that it is now independent. So now let's specify a dependency via Git. Here I'm going to change our path specification to the GitHub location of the baseline profile. I can even specify a branch, a release, or a tag that might describe this. In this case, I'm just going to use the branch of master. Here I'm going to remove the inspec.lock file again, and I'm going to execute a scan, and this time I should see the same results as I saw before. And of course, when I'm done, I'll take a look at that inspec.lock file to show you that indeed the inspec lock has now been updated to pull from Git instead of my local path. By default, InSpec, when you perform an execute, is going to generate the lock file for you. Now this may be cumbersome while you're developing your profile and adding a number of dependencies. So instead of removing the lock file every single time, you can execute a scan using no create lock file. And this will execute the profile without creating the lock file within the directory. Now we showed how to set up a dependency via a path and with Git, but not all of the various versions. But here you can see there are a number of other ways, via a URL, the supermarket, or a compliance server. If you'd like to learn more about InSpec, watch other videos in this series, or check out our documentation or tutorials.